Hey, welcome to A to Gen Z. This is our CPH, Concordia Publishing House webinar series, and we are discussing how those from Gen Z can partner with those who work with Gen Z to better understand this generation and especially think about church and future and how we interact together. I'm your host, Cassie Moore. I'm an author and director of Next Generation Ministries at St. Mark Lutheran Church and School in Houston, Texas. And you will be hearing from a whole bunch of incredible people over the next couple weeks. But we wanted to start with really important people to kick us off because you guys have a lot to say. So I'm going to kick it right to our Gen Z experts because you guys are Gen Z yourself. If you can share a little bit about who you are, what you're doing now, where you're living, and we'll dive in because we've got a lot of great stuff to cover today. Let's start with Rachel, is in my top right here.
Hello, my name is Rachel Bond, and I graduated from Concordia Irvine this past May, 2021, and I'm currently a Director of Christian Education intern serving in Escondido, California. And I am not doing a lot with youth ministry. I'm doing more lifespan with care opportunities. But I am able to work closely with our high school youth and other young adult families. So I am Gen Z, and I also still get to work with some in Gen Z, which is kind of cool.
Awesome. I'll kick it next to Nate.
Hey everyone, Nathan Larkins, currently in Tallahassee, Florida. I just finished up my last year at FSU and now on the road to trying to start my own coffee shop. That's been a passion of mine, trying to figure out next steps in life. So just serving, working currently, and trying to pursue that passion.
Great. Let's go to Ava next.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Ava. I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas, and I am finishing up my degree in Christian Education Leadership at Concordia University, Irvine.
Awesome. And speaking of Concordia University, Irvine, if we can go to Isaiah next.
Hi, I'm Isaiah Dewport. I'm a freshman at Concordia University, Irvine, and I run cross country and track and field here. And I also am double majoring in kinesiology and theological studies with a DCE minor.
Awesome. Great. And let's go to Michael next, because we have like kind of a Concordia theme going on here today, I think.
Hi everyone, my name is Michael Yee, and I just graduated along with Rachel in the same class of Ava as a Director of Christian Education. And I will start my internship with Cassie in St. Mark, Houston, starting in January, so very exciting, but currently here in the Bay Area, back in home in San Francisco, so just currently serving.
All right, great, thank you. And then last but not least, Emma.
Hi there, I'm Emma Polinsky. I'm originally from St. Pete, Florida, but I'm a current first year at Yale University studying probably chemical engineering, but we'll see. And yeah, I'm super excited for our conversation today.
Awesome. Well, these young people are just a few among many, many young people that I am blessed to work with and enjoy doing life alongside. I have worked at a number of churches from coast to coast, really. So I have picked up friendships with some really incredible people, and you guys are just a few of those incredible people. And I know just the conversations that a lot of us have had over the last couple of years, talking about issues that are important to Gen Z, whether that is politics or racism or environmental worries, or just the way that the church sees you, the way that adults interact with you. There have just been so many great conversations with you guys already. So I'm excited to dive in and have some good conversations today. So I'm going to throw out our first question. All right, are you ready? So if you could use 3 words to describe your generation, and we're talking Gen Z, so that's about ages 10 to 25 right now. So if you were born in kind of the mid 90s to kind of mid 2000s or 2005, that's kind of the range that we are looking at. So if you had 3 words to describe your generation, what would you say?
I can kick us off.
Go for it.
I think that Gen Z is digital. I think that's a huge marker of our generation. whether you were growing up alongside technology as it was developing, or you just had it from a young age. We're very digital. I think Gen Z is also very passionate. They care a lot about each other and the world that we live in, and they express it in very passionate and convicted ways. And I think that we're also anxious. There's a lot of different stressors in our world, and I know a lot of Gen Z that experiences just general anxiety.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. That's very true. Any other thoughts?
Kind of going off with what Ava was saying about passionate, I was thinking of the word aware, and I think those kind of connect, where we're really aware of what's going on personally within our friend groups, within our state, within all these different bubbles that we have, and kind of empathetic about them all, where everything kind of affects everyone. And so what are we doing to make it better? And then I was also thinking of the word aware, of the word confident. So we're aware of what's going on, and we're confident about who we are and what's right and what's wrong. And sometimes that can be a negative thing of like, no, you're wrong and I'm right. But trying to see it as I'm trying to care for another person, or trying to care about an issue that could maybe be fixed or at least worked on, and trying to make a stand and making it right, whatever that issue may be, small to large.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. And a lot of times people, they see that as, oh, you guys are overly opinionated, that, you just think that you can share your opinion on anything. And they forget sometimes the larger context, that you have grown up as a more connected generation than any other generation. You've had information at your fingertips your whole lives. So you do know a lot more than maybe other generations knew at your age. So that's a great point. Any other thoughts, how you would describe your generation?
Yeah, I think I can add here as well. I think my words go hand in hand with kind of the themes that you guys were mentioning. So I was kind of thinking that Gen Z is, first of all, collaborative. So that idea of just really being aware and connected is very, very true. And then I also was thinking open-minded. So to your point about being opinionated, that is so valid. But at the same time, I feel like never be afraid to like pick up a conversation with someone in Gen Z, because I feel like we're all very receptive to just like the different ideas that are out there, and just being able to have conversations about them and just discussions at length. Then my last word was resilient, because I feel like we've been through a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll talk a little bit about that later too, especially like just the last year and a half with this COVID-19 pandemic. We'll talk about what that has done, I think, to your generation, because we have a lot of thoughts. I know I've talked with a lot of you about this already, but yeah, really good insight so far, guys. Let me ask you this. What is the hardest thing about being your age?
I would say for me, this has been really brought forth in the past couple of weeks and just the past couple of months as I transitioned to college, is that there's a lot of different opinions out there by people that I know, love, and trust. And it's like, it's given with well intention and well meaning when I ask for advice or they offer up advice. But a lot of times, like, I found that it's hard to sift through all of them and still like make a decision that I feel like is right for me, but still don't want to turn people off that are giving me advice by me like to juggle, like, this is what my parents are saying, this is what my teachers are saying, this is what my coaches are saying, like which one in all that is right, and also what does God say about stuff. It's like that's just like been really hard, is like as I travel more into adulthood and more out of the house and in college, is like keeping those important foundations of my family and my faith, but also like who is right in all of this, and who do I listen to, and what if what I feel and what I feel like God is leading me somewhere else, like, well, I don't want to anger the people that I trust the most. So that's been difficult for me. And just talking to other friends, like when I help them out or they go to a pastor or their DCE and they don't like what they hear, is like, well, who is right? And that's the struggle for truth, is something that I feel like encapsulates all of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And that's one of the things they say about your generation is you don't so much need somebody that's giving you the information. You need a guide that walks with you and helps you interpret, what sense can I make of this, and how does this apply to my life, and what voice should I be listening to? Isaiah, do you have any advice on maybe how adults could do that better? Not to put you on the spot, but I think you're on a good theme here.
I know for me is like sometimes adults can, like, when you tell them about a decision you've made in like a relationship or a friendship or just any decision in your life, some adults may have the tendency to tell you you made the wrong decision, or like, oh, you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have had that conversation, you shouldn't have gone through those things. And like for me, like what I've started telling adults in my life is like, I made the decision already, and I have an idea of what I think if it was right or wrong. I need you to listen and give the advice and not just say, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that in the first place and you should have avoided that. I think listen and try to understand that what your life looked like 20 years ago is not what I'm going through, because there's a lot of different things, and I'm just a different person myself too. You can't live yourself through me or our generation, because we're all completely different.
Yeah, so true. Wise words.
Honestly, I'd like to touch on that because I think that's a good point, especially what you brought up at the end, that this is a completely different time than anything. I mean, touching on the words that we all use, interconnected, global. There's so much that you have to figure out with how much just the internet, like you were saying, Cass, has connected everybody, but it's a point where how do you even interact? How do you know what's true? And at some point you can see or hear anything at any time. It's hard to really know who's right. And the fact that we're trying to figure out what to do and trying to reach out to adults who honestly sometimes don't know the right answers. But I mean, it's great that you are aware to try and sift through and try and figure that out, because I think that's an important part, knowing how to determine, or at least get on the right track of who's right, who's wrong, and how it can actually benefit you, rather than just hearing you shouldn't have done this or the negative aspects. Being better to build rather than just deconstruct.
Very true.
Yeah. I would love
to
go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, Ava. I think adding what so Nathan said, that kind of question of not knowing and uncertainty. And I think coming from perspective compared to Isaiah, like for, I think Rachel, me and Ava, for us kind of just graduating, I think that perspective, like kind of like what now? And I think it also ties into our generation of also not coming from that perspective of being in a college environment, of being in an area where, you're constantly with friends, with, hanging out with professors or people, and living with your best friend, your roommates, your neighbors. So I think kind of inundated with just community. But then I think once you step out of that and graduated, it's kind of like this period or season of like, wow, like, what do I do now? Or there can be some unknown in that sense. But I think too, it's just realizing that it can feel very isolating, but also brings up the question that, that I can ask myself, am I truly alone, or am I just thinking by myself? So I think really reminding myself, like, there is people who care about me. There's family and friends, just like mentors. And I think for our generation, something that it seems like a common theme is just seeking out that just guidance and just that kind of older voice and mentors, and especially for those who are just strong in their faith, for us to guide us in that way.
All right. Ava, did you have something to add in here?
Oh, I was just thinking about the connectedness that like Nathan was kind of talking about, and how I think we talked about this a little bit before. Like even 30 years ago, your like circle of people you were connected to was like, your family, your extended family, and like your family friends, the people you went to school with, and it probably didn't like surpass 500. Like that would be a generous max. And now because of social media, like we're engaging with hundreds of thousands of people every day. And I think that just affects the way that we see ourselves and the world that we're living in so much. And it's so difficult to discern all of the different voices that we're hearing. And especially as Christians, like we have, at least for myself, like I've grown up hearing the word of God and experiencing that as the truth, but really needing mentors and pastors and DCEs and different kind of guides in my life to help me discern all the stuff that I'm hearing in the world with the word of God and how those can coexist, or how we understand what we're experiencing through a lens of Jesus.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up social media, because I think, as far as I know, I think you are all pretty active on social media, right? Maybe I'm asking a controversial question here, but how long have you been on social media? Because I think most of you at least 5 to 10 years, if I had to guess. Does that sound about right? So yeah, I know some of you are like, I don't want to admit because my parents might be watching this and I'm going to get in trouble. But I think that is a huge thing. You know, it wasn't until I was in college, you know, I was your guys' age when I first really got on social media. But just seeing you guys as a generation, your pictures, your baby pictures were online, right? And you have grown up with this digital footprint and this digital presence and this curated life. And it is hard, honestly, to go through those weird, awkward middle school years with the whole world watching. But I think that has led to just a different formation of you overall. I think it has led to some sense of interconnectedness, but also a little bit of ego. Also, you know, a lot of the pressure. I know you guys have mentioned pressure and sort of anxiety as major topics. Does anybody want to speak to that? Because we toss those words around a lot as young people, but where is all this pressure coming from? Where does this anxiety that I think most of you feel, where would you say that you think that is coming from in your life?
So one thing I was kind of thinking of was kind of connecting with the hardships that we face. We're told that we're so young and we have our whole life ahead of us. And yet there's this pressure that we're also supposed to know what we're doing and have it figured out. Even if we're met with in a super supportive environment where you're doing great with how young you are, all that kind of stuff, there's still this pressure of, I'm an adult. I'm in the workforce. I am in school to be in the workforce. And so you kind of get like spit out into the world that you've been connected with, that you've been in, but now you're living on your own, or you're living with roommates, you're working on your own, you're not in this kind of safe environment. And so I think some of this pressure is not spoken. I think it's just kind of like this society that we look at. We see other people working, we see them have this successful life, which that could be fake, because we always want to promote the happy side of things. So I think part of it's an unspoken pressure because we think other people have it together. And so when we feel like we don't, we think we might be doing something wrong, or we don't have the help that we need. We're just supposed to figure it out. So I don't know if I can speak into the specific place of where it is, but I think a lot of it's just that kind of outside pressure. Maybe even we just have it on ourselves because we're comparing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think going back to what Ava said, you're comparing to so many more people than other generations. So that has to make some sort of impact, right?
And even comparing to the other generations too, where even though it was 20 years ago for them, they had it all figured out. So shouldn't I, even though it's a different age, you are not your parents, you are not your friends, you are your own person. We can still use that community and learn off of each other, but it's going to be different for everyone based off of your life experience, you know?
Yeah, very true. What else? Where is this anxiety in your life?
I would say coming out of high school and having that fresh perspective, just graduating, there's like two different routes I'm going to go here, but they both kind of connect. Is like, just like in the general sense of high school, like the pressure is all around you in trying to succeed, especially in high school, trying to get to college. It's very much like, oh, you're not taking all honors. Oh, like, oh, you don't have all A's. So it's like, it's kind of like the getting to college is kind of like, you need to be top of the top to even have a chance to succeed. And that's the standard for a lot of the generation, is like, that's the people. But also as an athlete, especially as a runner, it's very much someone's coming from for your spot. and that's ties in with the college admission process, is that there's spots there. There's only a certain amount of jobs that you want to have. There's only certain positions there's only certain playing time, and you have to perform and be the best if you want to do that and succeed, which goes back to what he was talking about just now. Is just like parents and grandparents will like, well, I bought a house when I was 23. Okay, thanks. Like, what? There's housing is crazy right now. There's all this stuff. Like, it's not the same environment. So you have your peers around you is a constant source of comparison and anxiety and just like trying to be the best. And I think that's made worse by social media, because you swipe and you see a highlight reel of some freshman in high school who's just like dunking over kids, and it's like, oh, I'm a junior or a senior and I can't even. It's this constantly like comparison to other people. And like, especially for athletes, I feel like that's a huge thing, because there's only a certain amount of spots. And if someone transfers in to your school and he's a grade younger than you, but he's nationally ranked, like as an athlete, like that is just worse. And like going to college, like for me, it's been like, I was good at my high school, but now in college, I'm a nobody. And I have to start going back to that whole cycle again. And it's just kind of like, it's just your environment around you, and depending how you react to that personally is like, what's your family? Is your family driving you for success? Do you feel that pressure? I just think it's a lot of things, but I think it starts with the people around us, and I don't think that's intentional. That's the big thing. That's just the society is image based and success based, and it permeates to our whole generation, because there's only so many people that can be successful at a thing, which is unfortunate, but that's what society has shown us.
Isaiah, I think that's so well said. Like, there's so much pressure, I think, especially in like growing up going to public school, like so much pressure to be the best, be the top dog, take all AP classes, and if you don't, like, you're a failure, and that's just like the bottom line. And that's terrifying, like to think that if you don't do well in your AP classes, like that's it, your life is over. And because that's how it feels when you're in those classes. And then having gone through college, it was like this whole new world of like just getting to learn. And I felt like so much of that pressure was taken away once I finally like let go of the idea that I had to be the best in school in order to succeed in life. I think this like measure of what a successful life looks so different to Gen Z. And so that's part of it, is like we feel pressure or external pressures of what maybe culturally a successful life has looked like before. And that's not the desire of Gen Z. Like the housing market right now is really hard and difficult. And so like Gen Z is not buying houses. We are traveling and trying to get like really well-rounded, full experience lives. And that, I guess, is more the measure of success for Gen Z, is like getting to go on trips and learning and the kinds of relationships that we build, instead of like having a really nice job and a house by the time we're 25. And so I think that kind of shift has really affected the kind of pressure that we feel externally on us.
Yeah, and I think that's a good note, Ava, that your generation may have a different set of priorities, but because you have different goals, that's not a rejection of what your parents or your grandparents maybe saw as a priority for their own lives. Because I think that's sometimes when you get the whole family around the table, at Thanksgiving, and you start talking about the things that, well, when are you going to settle down and, get married and have a family and buy a house and, get that job and hold on to it. There are just different priorities in Gen Z. And I think, Ava, all the research, it shows exactly what you said, to travel and to be financially successful, and to be financially independent, to have a career and have a good education. All the research shows that's the priority to Gen Z. It's not so much the, get married right away and start raising your family. And it's just a different set of things that people want. And there's nothing wrong with that.
It's not a rejection. Yeah, it's not a rejection or like disrespect of the generations that have gone before us at all. It's just a different priority. And I think a lot of that comes from what we were talking about earlier about this, like we are so globally connected that then we want to like see it more, and we want to be a part like physically of something that we're just seeing every day.
Mm-hmm. I think to go back to what Isaiah said too, I think there's a significant amount of academic pressure for your generation. And I think maybe adults don't always see that is a major concern. You know, I was talking to a third grader a couple weeks ago, and this third grader was telling me, I've already started looking at colleges that I want to go to, and I'm thinking about what I want to do. Like, third grade, you know? It is amazing how young this pressure starts. And I think that's something, you know, a big takeaway for me. Just there is a lot of pressure, and that's, you know, some of that is self-imposed, but sometimes it is coming, you know, subconsciously from the people around you saying, hey, so what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I don't know, you know, I'm older than you guys. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So let's take that pressure off the table, right? Speaking of anxiety, I am curious, this has been a huge topic with pretty much everybody in ministry that I have talked to in the last year and a half. And that is COVID-19, this pandemic that we are all tired of talking about, right? But I am curious, from your perspective, how has this affected Gen Z? Because it is a major concern for everybody, not just you guys, but those of us who love you guys and want to see you thrive and want to know how to help you. So can anybody tell me, like, how have you seen this pandemic affect Gen Z? What have been the lasting changes or consequences to your generation?
I can speak on this. I would say, like, in terms of like COVID-19, it's just been very isolating, but in kind of a weird way, because like Ava was mentioning earlier with our social circles, we have such big online presences and such big online social circles. So it's like you still have connections, but it's so just completely different. Like for me, like personally trying to grapple with that fact, it's like I'm technically socializing every day, but it's not the same as being in person. Like I definitely relate to like older generations. Like sometimes, you know, there's that like kickback against technology, and it's like, no, like I definitely value an in-person conversation like more than that. And so it's very isolating. It was definitely hard. Like I know, like I went to a public school, and the transition to online school was very intense, very difficult. A lot of kids, especially kids who were already struggling, like low socioeconomic, maybe they had to be working for their families, and especially with COVID, a lot of kids at my like high school dropped out to go work. And so like just thinking of those effects and how like that'll probably be a ripple we'll still be feeling like as a generation for years to come, is just something really interesting to think about. And I think it's very unique because even our grandparents haven't dealt with something like this. Like talking to adults, like they don't know how to handle this situation either.
Yeah, good thoughts. Any other thoughts? What has been the lasting impact of this pandemic on your generation? Isolation, I think, is huge. I think you're spot on, Emma. What else have you guys been seeing?
I mean, I think what I've seen is that the isolation has driven more importance of the communities that we do have around us. Because especially once I got back to school in California, once we did our hybrid stuff, everyone was just in their circles that they had, and so that tightened the circles. And I feel like people now are more clinging to that, and the importance of, this is my group, I'm going to find it, and I'm going to spend all the time I can with these people because I don't know when I'm going to lose it. So that's what I saw. That's what I kind of saw and was a part of at the past year and a half. Is like, especially going to college, like I found a group of people, I'm going to stay. We're going to do everything together because I don't want to be alone. And I think that's a big thing. Is our generation does not like being alone, and so they'll. I know people that are just pack their schedules, completely pack their schedules, and they're like, I'm so tired. I'm like, why are you doing this? And they're like, I just don't want to be alone. Like I want to be doing something. I want to be out. I want to be around other people because they don't like being alone. But I also think that it's raised the importance of mental health, and like and seeking out help, seeking out healthy coping mechanisms. The church I did youth at the past year and a half before coming to college, they were able to stay open during COVID, and they launched we went through a book called More Than Okay. I have it right here. I don't know, I'm just doing this, and we went through this whole book. It was like a daily thing. We did it all together, and that helped me analyze myself and then talk about it with a leader and a counselor, and just go through it and just like realize so many things about myself that I didn't even know. And so that now my quality of life after the pandemic and my mental state has improved so much. So I think it helped us realize the importance of what we have in our communities, but also realize that like we have stuff that we need to figure out in our brains that we didn't even think was a real thing beforehand. So I think those are two big things.
I think also to like touch on that, I think it's really cool how your church had that emphasis on like being together, but like also talking to a counselor or someone that's like kind of guiding you. Because I think that's something that our generation has really leaned into, is like counseling and therapy for our anxiety, and like getting help and knowing that it's not like the end all be all if you are experiencing anxiety or depression, and that there's like hope and there's help for those things. Because I think even I remember when I was like in 8th, 9th grade, the like perception of mental health is so different than it is now, like 8 years later. And just that idea that you can talk about it when you are struggling mentally. And I think one of those things too that is emerging in regard to mental health is like body image. I think through this pandemic, like a lot of people have either fallen into a really severe comparison trap, or just we've seen so many different images because we're on our phones more, we're watching more TV. And so it's easier for us to like compare how we look to people we see on a screen that might be photoshopped or touched up or whatever, and how that like affects how we look at ourselves. And like I was talking to my counselor the other day, and I think Cassie and I had talked about this too. Like I can't speak for guys, but I know so many girls who struggle with body image issues, no matter what they look like, across the board. Like that has been such a significant like anxiety, social issue the last like year and a half, since we weren't seeing each other as often. And then it was like, okay, well, how am I expected to look when I start seeing people again? And maybe I'm not at like my goal weight, or all these things that in a year of like lots of unknowns, it's like hard to control your weight. And then you start interacting with people again, and there's this like added nervousness of like, oh my goodness, like I look different, are things going to be different but in my relationships because of that?
Yeah, those are great points. I feel like I could just talk to you guys, and for some of you, I have sat in coffee shops and talked about some of these issues for hours and hours and hours, so it's hard to condense it all down. I think I'm curious on the question of anxiety and mental health, because we know that those are huge topics to your generation, right? Like across the board, these are the kind of things that you guys are openly discussing with each other, about each other, maybe with your parents or grandparents. Do you see conflict with your openness in discussing it versus other generations maybe not supporting it or not wanting to talk about it? Does anybody have any insight on that? Is that something that you guys see and experience? I see a lot of nodding, so must be onto something.
I've been told, like just very bluntly by friends' parents before, like we were having a conversation with them, talking about, you know, she had been going through some stuff at school, and they were very much like, oh yeah, like your generation has all these mental health issues and we don't understand why. Like our generation, we lived through this and we were fine. And it was just very like frustrating to hear. And I like can understand how that like could be an opinion, because in one lens, like yes, we sort of are dealing with like the same things, you know, going through college, getting a job, whatever. But it's also like our world has evolved so much and it's so different. And I think if anything, like just social media and the way that that warps your mind, I think is enough in itself to really just be a catalyst for all these issues. I'm not saying that like necessarily all mental health issues are traced back to social media, but I think just like even seeing that alone and how most of Gen Z uses social media, it's not that unlikely for like all these issues to be a thing and for them to actually exist. So I think like, especially just like to older generations, just please like be receptive to mental health, because it can be like very just like offsetting when someone tells you like, hey, like I don't like have any like I don't like see that as a valid issue, when in reality like a lot of Gen Z is dealing with that. And like to Isaiah's point, like having the church like reach out to him and like work with students on that, like that's so valuable and it means so much.
So Emma, I think what I hear you saying is that is a very quick way to shut down conversation with a young person, is to say, oh, I think that's stupid, or nobody needs that, or it's not worthwhile. Is that right? Okay. Okay, good to know. I think that's a good takeaway for us. And I think again, going back to the social media thing, it absolutely has an effect. And I think we live in such a fast-paced world now. And on top of that, we have not even touched on the fact that you're the generation that you've grown up in a world of terror, right? You've been hearing about terrorist attacks and school shootings and shootings in malls and Walmarts since you guys were infants. So I think that is something that, kind of going back to what a few of you have said, there is a lot of just concern about whose voice do I listen to? Who can I trust? Who is there for me? Who's going to walk beside me through all of these difficult things, whether it's stress over college or it's anxiety over social media or just, what is going on in my brain, because there is so much in my brain. There's a lot of opportunity for people to speak into that, but it has to come from a place of wanting to know versus telling you it's not a big deal, just get over it, right? So I think that's a great point. Any other thoughts on just anxiety in general, what you would like older generations to know, how they could help you maybe as you walk through that? What would be the best thing that somebody who's maybe a little bit older, who cares about you, what could they do to help you with the anxiety that you have?
The one thing I was thinking of, just going back like 30 seconds, even if you do think that it's stupid or you don't understand why we would be struggling with that, bite your tongue and say why, and just ask questions where it may not seem like a big deal, but say, oh, why is this a big deal? Can you inform me on it? And just kind of be a listening ear, where I think our generation is able to see a lot of different experiences that other people have had. We're not necessarily asking, people are just sharing, and it pops up on our feed. And so then we get to learn in kind of an organic way. And so when you're kind of met with that conflict face to face, instead of just shutting it down and scroll past, then actually kind of say, oh, why is this a big deal? And just kind of listen through, where we can also learn and hear the other perspective as well. So it's not just a one-way thing. But I think that's kind of the biggest thing, not just taking that information and blowing it off, or taking that information and thinking you addressed it, but setting up a time to talk. I know time is a really big thing. We want to fill it. We don't want to be alone. But making that time, saying, hey, I care for you. I'd love to learn more. If you want to come sit in somewhere or whatever. I think that's been really helpful for me with just even times that I felt overwhelmed, whether with work, with school, with relationships, just feeling like I'm not a burden on someone, of sharing my thoughts and feelings. And even if I am being dramatic with how I'm feeling and there's a logical explanation to it, just the fact that someone's willing to listen, and kind of, even if we have that relationship, call me out and say, hey, you're being a little dramatic, but I understand where you're coming from. That I know personally goes a long way of just feeling validated, and what I'm feeling matters because there's a reason I'm feeling it. So there's a reason, there's a reason for it, and you may not understand it, but it's a valid reason. And that's to go for all of us. We've all had different experiences. We've all seen different things. And so there's a reason why we believe something, what we think, what we're passionate about, what we're feeling, and all that.
Honestly, I just want to add on, because I like what you said. It's not only trying to be able to give perspective, but also trying to gain it at the same time. And honestly, going back to something that Isaiah said earlier, this is a time where pretty much everybody with the pandemic learned that they never know when something could be taken away. And you never know when, how, what, why. And why it's so important and prevalent and popping up everywhere that people talk about their mental health and all the issues that we just addressed is because you can't look back to the past and the older generation to give you insight on something they don't completely understand. And so trying to balance those two sides of the coin of what can I reach back, ask, and get proper guidance on, and then which this might also be a problem why a lot of people feel alone is, well, if I can't reach back and gain that perspective and they can't give me that perspective, well, then how do I get it? And if that's even a possibility. So trying to put all that into one shell of existence that we have right now is something that's kind of hard to deal with.
Yeah, I think there is what you're saying, Nate. There is a tremendous amount of loneliness and even fear and uncertainty and doubt about the future. And just there are a lot of complex emotions for everybody at every age right now, but especially for Gen Z, you guys are on the brink of, you know, a lot of self-discovery at the same time, and a lot of new experiences and a lot of new independence and choices that you have to make. And it's created sort of a perfect storm of just a lot to handle, right? Like it's a lot. So I think that this is it's really good insight for us to take out of this, to say, you know what, we are anxious, we are uncertain, we are feeling lonely, we feel like we need some perspective, we don't always know where to get it. These are all takeaways for us to know as the people that want to help you, right? What would you like to see older people, specifically, we'll say specifically those in the church or those who are maybe people who guide your faith life, how would you like them to see them reaching out to your generation right now? I know Isaiah had a great story about how his church kind of through the pandemic really helped him, but what would you guys like to see from the church? And I'd love to hear from everybody on this particular question. What would you like to see from the church to reach out to your generation and connect with you?
Yeah, I think the first things that comes to mind is I think just providing open hands and open hearts, and I think too just being a welcome place to be open. I think coming off from the pandemic conversation, anxiety, and I think for that being very isolating, what was very tough was just like having an environment or a community to go to. But I think at the same time, seeing churches that did offer to open their place up, you know, for their neighborhood and community. And I think that was just so life-giving to see, and that remind like, or just even other just businesses or things like that, that willing to open their hearts for us in that way. But I think too, just continuing to pray for us, you know, to be supportive in one another, and that I just seeing just people to just, you know, meet out in the parking lots and just pray together, or just, you know, just do really silly or fun things, but just to be present with one another. And I think just those really simple things really matter. And I think that kind of gives perspective on what we prioritize in this life. And I think the church can just be such a great and valuable beacon of hope, beacon of light for not only our generation, but for other generations as well, to just be continuing to just support one another.
One way I've seen that, I guess, lived out is when I joined or started working at my church, I had a lot of people offer themselves just for help. And I found that a really easy way to know who really to ask was when they shared what their gifts were, and that I could just call on them whenever. So I had one couple, or a wife told me, she goes, if you need anything fixed or made, let me know, because my husband can do it. And then they actually invited me over to their house for dinner. And that was a really great way just to open up a relationship, knowing what I could ask them for, if I needed help with that specific thing, with needing something built or whatever, but then also knowing that they were willing to give that extra hand whenever. But then also, when there's an opportunity to meet, jumping on it and taking it. And so if there's things that churches have young adult groups, going to that maybe, or just even if you're not, but act interested in our lives and what we're doing, and asking those questions of, so maybe not saying, well, what do you do? But what keeps you busy? I've heard someone ask that, and I thought it was really great, because we may not all have the same experience of going to college and working right away and having a career in that, but there's things that we're doing during our day. And so what keeps you busy? What do you enjoy doing? I think those are really easy steps with just starting a relationship because it makes us think, oh, they care, rather than pushing that and saying, just acting and caring and asking those questions is important.
Going off of that, I would say that providing a consistent, safe, trusted environment where I know what adults are going to be there every Wednesday or every Sunday after church. And there's going to be a consistent adults there that are wanting and willing to pour into me. Because like the biggest thing is like, I've been in groups and friends and gone to events where it's been just in and out a revolving door of like, well, this adult is here every time, but my small group leaders constantly change. So it's hard to build that deep connection where I feel comfortable with sharing out something that's really bothering me. Because if we don't have it for a while, or something comes up that like, oh, I just don't know why youth is happening, that kind of like hurts that relationship. So like consistent like interaction in a place where I feel like our generation can come and feel safe and have fun with their friends, but also have a consistent adult presence in their life where that relationship can be built over time. Because a lot of the relationships I feel like we've described of trust and things like that, that doesn't happen super easily. So if you're an adult and you're like, I want to be like this for my kids, and it's not you and it's not them. It's a combination of just getting to know and build that. And that's why I feel like the consistency and the honesty from all stages of, I'm here for you guys, I'm listening to you guys are valued. Over time, you'll see that the fruits of that come up. And I feel like as a leader, when I've had that experience of people that I poured into come to me, that's when all of that work of just wondering if it was going to happen, that's what fulfills me. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I think kind of just adding to what you all have said, like thus far, like just having that welcoming space, having people available, really just not ever like negating what the youth are bringing, but really just being receptive to it. I've been talking a lot in one of my classes recently about the whole idea of like genuine interest. And I think that is like a very good term to think about, like what we want to see from the church, like just genuine interest, like, and making sure that you express that and really just show like people that you're invested in their lives and you value them as people, just makes such a difference. And I feel like it's such a small thing, like it's such an easy step towards what we want to see.
Well said, Emma. I think honestly, like just like we said, Gen Z is so passionate about everything in their lives. And when you as an adult like show genuine interest and genuine support and encouragement of something that a young person is excited about or working towards, like that can mean the world. I think another thing too is like listening to the issues that Gen Z wants to talk about. And sometimes we need to be spoken the truth in love. Like sometimes there are times we are going to need to be called out, but I think what's important is that it's done in love and that it's in that trusted relationship that has been built up by investment from both parties. Because then that conversation is going to be so open and it's going to be full of trust, and the relationship will probably not suffer when you need to like call them out, because there's that like genuine care of the human being, of the person that's designed by God, and that relationship. And so I think, like y'all said, just that genuine interest, the care about each other.
Yeah, to say something myself too. I love all the points that everyone's making, because that's one thing that kind of struck me when the pandemic occurred and everything was shut down, was missing that community, not just going to Sunday church service, but everything that comes outside of that, the personal connections, relationships, being able to pour into people, having people pour into you, and that connectivity. But also on a personal note, one thing that I learned with church back home and then a couple of churches here in Tallahassee is not just when I grew up, I mean, I went to church, but it was just a thing to do. But the more teaching I heard, the more I realized, especially with this generation of technology, everybody has questions. And so my biggest thing is not just knowing I have faith, but why. That was one thing I dealt with a lot, especially when I was alone and had all my questions. The biggest thing I always fall with is, why do I believe? And then the more I searched through my faith and actually tried to get those questions answered, and then the more people I reached out to who could actually pour into me and help me navigate, that helped me tremendously. But having it more readily accessible, I mean, those spaces that you said, safe spaces, those people that you can trust and go to, having more of that and creating that interconnected community that one we grew up in and that were useful, I think that'll be amazing in just developing people in their spiritual faith, personal, and everything that they need.
Thank you. You guys are all so eloquent and just so well spoken. I love hearing from you and picking your brains. To go off of what Nate said here at the end, and to kind of wrap us up as a one final question to consider. This will be something that we're talking about with our other expert panels in the upcoming weeks. But what would you guys love to see? Let's say down the road, 20 years from now, you're in church, you're active in your church. What kind of things would you love to see in your church? I think it sounds like relationships are a huge thing for you guys. I think, Nate, what you were saying, just having genuine people that are willing to walk with you through the doubts and through the questions, and to really be there as you wrestle through life's tough stuff. Those are going to be some key things. But you guys tell me, what would you love to see in 20 years? What would you love to see your church look like? What would be beneficial for your generation?
In terms of like kind of gathering what we all just said, something that I've noticed like currently that I think is working that I'd like to see more of is I've seen a lot of churches open themselves up like to the greater community, whether that be like opening like a coffee shop or like a workspace like within their buildings, because obviously you're not using like the entirety of your church building every single day for all hours. So like sometimes like they'll do like 12 to 4, there'll be like a coffee shop open, or just like a workspace open, or just having like events that maybe extend even to greater social circles outside of the church. Like I have so many friends in, like I know in Gainesville specifically, there's a church that has a coffee shop, and so many of my friends who like aren't religious just love to go to that coffee shop, and it's created this point of like talk, and it's actually brought up a lot of interesting conversations for people who maybe are exploring their faith who weren't even interested beforehand. So just having, again, very welcoming spaces, things like that are maybe a bit more innovative or you didn't think of before. The church space hadn't been used in that way prior.
Yeah, and I know Emma and I actually used to go to a local coffee shop all the time with a Bible study group a couple years ago, and we just by being in the coffee shop, we ended up having great conversations with some of the baristas and some of the other people that were there. And there were times when they just hop in, like end their shift and hop in and enjoy our Bible study, which was amazing. And especially framing, going into what we experienced, I think having a little bit of joy and a little bit of community was huge. So that's great. Any other thoughts? What you'd love the church to look like in 20 years?
I would love something like, especially growing up in the church, I would love like, I hope I don't offend people, but like, I would love to see the old people come and get involved with us, like the Gen Z and the high schoolers, because a lot of times I feel like no matter what church I've ever gone to, it's the youth, they're doing their thing right now, and then it's everyone else, and then when everything lets out at the same time, it's just kind of just like a awkward, weird shift. And you see a lot of people, you see the same faces every Sunday that go to church, and they're in the main service, and then the youth stuff's happening. But there's never like a mix of that. And I feel like that would help the congregation at large if there was intentional times where let's announce the congregation, come pick up basketball with some of the high schoolers, or come do a cornhole tournament, and just get them involved. So it's just more faces and more interaction besides just the people that are coming and already spending the intentional time. with the youth. I think that like I've had some great relationships with people that didn't necessarily come to, and were volunteered at youth, but I saw them in church and they reached out at a servant event and we served together. And it's like stuff like that. So it's not just so divided, because I think that's something that we could totally go in and it's like how it feels divided and how we don't feel. I think it'd be huge just to mix that, because I think I've seen 9 kids, like we all have felt that one way or another.
Yeah, one thing that I think is really cool are those service opportunities, where I think a lot of where we become overwhelmed, and I think this is a lot of us, all of us, but especially our generation, becoming overwhelmed with all of the issues everywhere. But then understanding that there's issues within our church, with just congregation members, they need help, but then also our immediate community of how can we go out and serve and address some of those needs where you're a temporary fix, but you're still helping in some way, and coming alongside each other of all generations and building those bridges and working alongside each other and doing hard labor and building kits and doing all that fun stuff. We were able to have a day called Faith in Action, and I was able to help organize that back in September. And we want to make this kind of a regular thing, because I think a lot of us of all generations want to just help and serve, and sometimes we don't know how. And so having the church set up regular events and times so that you can be with one another, and not just saying this is what we're doing, but asking, hey, where are the needs? Where can we help? And where are people's passions, and using what the church already has and going out and doing it. I think that's really awesome.
And
cool to see.
one more thing to intentionally plug the youth into that.
Yes.
Our generation into that. Like,
yeah,
because I know like churches do that, but like to go to the high school group or the college group and be like, guys, this is happening. We're gonna go as a group. Because I know a lot
I think
of times
that like
it's
intentionality is so good. The intentionality and just like intergenerational ministry, community ministry is so important. And like specifically going to each age group, I'm thinking like, we want you at this event and we want to be a part of our community, like builds bridges in so many different ways. And I think that's the way to go. Well said, guys.
And I will say I love that we are doing this together to give you guys a voice now. Sometimes not all churches do this, and we don't always see that you guys have a lot to share. So I'm glad that you guys are all sharing. Nate, you want to close this out and then we'll wrap this thing up?
Yeah. I just want to say, honestly, everything that you guys just said, I agree with wholeheartedly. Because that's one of the things I look for in any church I'm trying to find a home in, is how to actually live out my faith. So having those service opportunities, more of the interconnectedness with the youth, and actually being able to, with the entire church, show my faith and love as I go along and learn it with everyone too. Those are some of the biggest things that I would love to see at every church.
Yes, and I hope that the takeaway from this, because you guys have just shared excellent stuff all around, but the takeaway for those who are watching this, our young people want you involved in their lives, and they want you to be able to speak freely with them and serve alongside of them. You guys have never expressed a desire to just be a closed off generation, but you know that you want the rest of us walking alongside with you. So we are excited to explore this more in the next 2 webinars that we have coming up, which will be the same time next week. So we have an excellent panel of just ministry experts from all around the country that are going to talk into what you guys shared today, what we can continue to do as a church body, as coaches, as pastors, as youth directors, as teachers. What can we do to really embrace your generation and to build you up, and to include you in these necessary conversations, because we know that you are not the future, right? You are the present. So we need you involved now. We need you guys alongside us in everything that we go through. So if you want to check this out further, if you go to cph.org/Gen Z, you'll see a free resource guide, kind of get the discussion going in your own context. with your own community, whether that's your school, your staff, maybe your family. That'd be a great way to get connected. But we're going to be on social media. So hashtag A to Gen Z is our social media tag. And don't forget to drop some comments in here if anything you're dying to know for our next webinar. But we have 2 more great webinars coming up after this. So we are excited to hear a little bit more. But for today, this was an excellent start with incredible insight from wonderful people that I love and adore. So thank you guys for sharing everything that you did with us. We are here for you. We are here with you. And we are so glad that you guys spoke up and shared with us today. So thank you guys for being a part of this. And we'll see the rest of you next week, same time. Thanks so much.